A respectful man walks into a luxury car showroom only to be targeted, insulted, and nearly removed, just because he didn't look the part. But what they don't know is, the man they tried to embarrass actually owned the building they were standing in. This is a story about power, perception, and the moment's silence speaks louder than rage. Stay with us. That one's worth more than your life, the man said, just loud enough for people nearby to hear. His friends laughed behind their champagne glasses. Jaylen didn't flinch. He stood quietly near the velvet rope, hands in his pockets, just admiring the smooth gray coat of the Rolls-Royce. He hadn't touched it. He hadn't even crossed the line. But in that moment, surrounded by millionaires in suits and watches, his presence alone felt like a challenge to someone who couldn't handle it. Have you ever been in this kind of situation or ever seen someone get hated, not for what they did, but just for staying calm when they were being disrespected? Let us hear it in the comments. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Let's rewind. Jaylen Barnes walked into Sterling Auto with one thing in mind: reliability. Nothing flashy, nothing new. Just a dependable used car to replace his worn-down Civic that had finally quit on him last week. He came alone, gray hoodie, clean jeans, and a manila folder tucked under his arm. The dealership had good reviews. He'd found a decent 2013 Corolla online, already pre-approved for financing. All he needed was to sign the paperwork and leave. But as he stepped onto the polished tile floor, something caught his eye. On the far end of the showroom, behind velvet ropes and branded signs, sat a collection of machines that didn't even look street legal. A bright orange Lamborghini Urus, a midnight black Rolls-Royce Ghost, and at the center, like a jewel in a crown, a silver Bugatti Chiron, its engine softly growling as they prepped it for display. Above them, the sign read, Sterling Elite Ultra Luxury Line, one-day showcase. Jaylen paused, not long, just enough to appreciate the craft, the engineering. He didn't take out his phone, didn't ask questions. He just stood there for a moment, soaking it in. And that's when he walked in. The doors slid open, and in came a man who looked like money had raised him since birth. Blue blazer tailored to the inch, gold cufflinks, slick back hair, and loafers with soles that had never touched gravel. His name was Chadwick. You didn't need to be told. It was written all over his posture. He walked in like the room was his, like the velvet ropes were put there to keep everyone else out. Two friends flanked him, both grinning and smug, champagne already in hand. They were here for the launch party by invitation only. And then Chadwick saw Jaylen. His grin twitched because Jaylen wasn't wearing a Rolex. He wasn't standing with a salesperson. He wasn't sipping champagne. He was just there. "Keep dreaming, brother," Chadwick called out, stepping closer, loud enough for the nearby staff to hear. "They don't offer layaway on Bugattis." Jaylen turned slightly, gave him a polite smile. "Maybe not today," he said quietly, "but one day." And just like that, he turned and walked away. He didn't fire back, didn't try to prove anything. He just went back to the front desk where the salesperson, Derek, was prepping his financing paperwork. But that simple calm, that grace, that's what pissed Chadwick off the most. He stood there blinking, the smirk gone from his face. His friends didn't laugh this time because Jaylen hadn't given him what he wanted. And some people, they can't handle not being feared. Chadwick stared after Jaylen like he was studying a problem he didn't know how to solve. And that's when the switch flipped. He didn't want Jaylen gone because he touched anything. He wanted him gone because he didn't crawl. He leaned over to one of the nearby employees, motioned subtly toward Jaylen. "You might want to watch that one," he muttered. "Been circling those cars a little too long." The employee hesitated, but nodded. And Chadwick? He stood back, sipping his drink, watching with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Chadwick didn't move from his spot near the velvet rope. He just stood there watching Jaylen like he was a problem that needed solving. Jaylen, on the other hand, was calmly reviewing paperwork with Derek, the junior salesman. He wasn't whispering, wasn't side-eyeing the luxury cars anymore. He was just focused, answering questions, handing over documents, signing page by page. But to Chadwick, that still wasn't enough. He leaned against the champagne bar, nodded toward Jaylen again, and muttered to one of the showroom employees walking past. "Seriously, y'all just letting anybody wander around in here now? I thought this was a luxury launch, not a free-for-all." The employee, young and clearly nervous, offered a tight smile but didn't say much. That's when Chadwick raised his hand and waved over the front desk. "Can you get the manager out here, please?" He said loudly enough for others to hear. The receptionist looked startled but picked up the phone anyway. Jaylen heard that. So did Derek. But Jaylen didn't even turn around. He just kept signing. Have you ever been in a room where people didn't like you? Not because of who you were, but because of how calm you stayed when they tried to make you break? Let me know in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. The manager came out moments later, walking fast and looking around like someone had tripped a silent alarm. His name tag read, Mr. Rourke, General Manager. Trim haircut, pressed white shirt, cufflinks, the kind of man who always smiled with his teeth, but never with his eyes. Chadwick wasted no time. Glad you're here, he said, motioning to Jaylen with his glass. That guy's been hovering around the display cars. Gave me and my guys a weird vibe. I don't know what his deal is, but it's making guests uncomfortable. Mr. Rourke followed his gaze toward Jaylen. No questions, no fact-checking, just a quick nod, then a straight walk toward the front desk, toward Derek and Jaylen. Derek straightened up. Hey, Mr. Rourke, he said, trying to sound upbeat. We're just wrapping up the financing on a Corolla. Mind if I have a quick word with your customer? Mr. Rourke said, not breaking eye contact with Jaylen. Jaylen turned, slow and steady. He looked Mr. Rourke dead in the face. Is there a problem? Mr. Rourke offered a smile. Not necessarily. Just wanted to remind all our guests that today's luxury showcase is for high-tier clients only. We're asking everyone to remain in their designated browsing areas. Derek shifted awkwardly. He's not browsing, though. He's just buying a used car. But Mr. Rourke kept going. There was a report that you were lingering around the VIP display section. We just want to ensure everyone here feels safe and respected. Jaylen raised an eyebrow. Safe? He glanced toward Chadwick, who was now pretending not to listen, despite facing them directly. I didn't cross any lines. I looked at a few cars, then came here to finish my paperwork. And I'm sure that's true, Mr. Rourke said quickly. But we just need to be proactive. You understand? Jaylen held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded once. I understand exactly what this is, he said. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue, didn't play into it. He just turned back toward Derek and asked, Can we keep going? Derek nodded and continued, though slower now, his hands a little shaky. Mr. Rourke stayed where he was for a beat, then walked away, but his tone lingered in the air. Chadwick. He smiled again. He'd gotten what he wanted, attention, suspicion, control. But something about Jaylen still unsettled him, because even after being singled out, after being approached like a threat in the middle of a luxury showroom, Jaylen still hadn't broken. What would you do if someone reported you just for existing in a room they didn't think you deserved to be in? Would you fight it, or stay calm and let the world show its face? Chadwick was getting irritated. He'd done everything he could to bait Jaylen, mocked him, reported him, watched the manager confront him, but somehow none of it rattled him. Jaylen was still there, still sitting, still calm. That calm, that's what made Chadwick lose his. Across the showroom, the luxury launch was in full swing. Glasses clinked, shutters clicked, laughter echoed under the vaulted ceilings as executives showed off Lamborghinis like they were trophies. Jaylen, meanwhile, sat across from Derek at a side desk, double-checking the loan paperwork. His ID sat neatly beside the documents. He was just waiting for a printout. But the looks, they were starting to come. Other guests had begun to notice the tension. Not the luxury buyers, but employees, receptionists, porters, interns. People who watched Chadwick pace the floor and glare like he owned the place. Derek leaned in. Hey, you okay? Jaylen gave a short nod. They don't want me here, he said quietly. But I'm not going anywhere. Have you ever felt that? That moment where the whole room shifts, not because of what you did, but because of what someone else believes about you. Tell me in the comments, and let us know where you're watching from. Chadwick wasn't done. He walked back toward the velvet rope, set his drink down, and waited until a few eyes were on him. Then he made his move, loud enough for the staff nearby to hear. Hey, who's in charge of security? He called out, because I just saw that guy touch the rolls. Every head turned. Mr. Rourke, the manager, came hurrying out of his office. What happened? That guy, Chadwick said, pointing across the floor at Jaylen. I saw him leaning over the rope. His hands were all over the hood. I'm telling you, he's casing the place, probably trying to get fingerprints off. Derek stood up halfway from his chair. That's not true, he said quickly. He hasn't even gotten up. He's been sitting with me the whole time. But Mr. Rourke hesitated, because Chadwick was loud and wealthy and dressed like someone whose complaints mattered. Mr. Rourke turned and looked straight at Jaylen. Is that true? Wait a second. Tell us where you are watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Jaylen didn't move, didn't stand, didn't plead. Yes, I've been sitting here the whole time. Ask your cameras. Chadwick scoffed. Or maybe the cameras just missed it. People like that know how to move when no one's looking. The room went quiet. Too quiet. Derek looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. A female employee near the coffee bar whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Mr. Rourke's jaw tensed. "We're going to need to pause this sale for a moment," he told Derek. "I'll have someone review the footage." Jaylen let out the faintest breath. "You can pause it if you want," he said, "but I'm not going to defend myself against a lie just because someone rich said it loud enough." Chadwick crossed his arms. "Funny how that works, isn't it? You show up in a hoodie, wander around million-dollar cars and expect people not to ask questions." Jaylen turned toward him slowly. "I didn't ask you anything. I didn't speak to you, and I didn't touch your car." Mr. Rourke raised his hand. "Gentlemen, please, let's not escalate. We'll have someone verify everything shortly, but by then, the damage was done." Other customers were watching. One guy pulled out his phone. A woman quietly ushered her child away from the scene. Derek glanced at Jaylen, nervous. "They're going to pull the footage. That'll clear this up." Jaylen just nodded once, but Chadwick wasn't finished. He walked over to the front desk, leaned in, and said 2 words that changed the whole temperature of the room. "Call security. What would you do right now? Defend yourself, or let the lie collapse under its own weight?" Because in that moment, everyone was watching. "That's him right there," Chadwick barked as the front doors swung open. "He's the one I told you about, messing with the roles, acting sketchy. You better check him before he disappears." 2 uniformed officers stepped into the showroom, hands resting close to their belts. They weren't playing games. The laughter stopped. The showroom fell quiet. Jaylen stood up slowly. No panic, no sudden movements. He just calmly placed his hands behind his back and looked them in the eyes. The taller officer spoke first. "Sir, we got a report of suspicious activity. We're going to need to ask you to step outside." Derek nearly jumped out of his seat. "No, he's with me. He hasn't done anything. I've been helping him with financing this whole time." But Chadwick wasn't done. He stepped right in between the officers and pointed again. "I saw him touching the Rolls Royce. He's been circling that car all day like he was planning something. If you're waiting to see him steal it, it'll be too late." Mr. Rourke, the manager, stood awkwardly to the side, saying nothing. The officers took a step closer. The taller one said again, "Sir, we're not going to argue here. Outside now." Jaylen blinked slowly, took a breath, and just as he turned to move, a voice cut through the room from the far end. "Hey, back off him." Heads turned. The crowd shifted. A man stepped out from the luxury wing. Blazer, no tie, tan slacks, calm posture, clipboard in hand. Not security, not a cop. But every employee in the showroom immediately stood straighter when they saw him. Mr. Rourke's face changed, like he recognized him and didn't know what to say. The man walked toward them casually, like he'd been watching the whole thing unfold. He looked at Jaylen, then at the officers. "You're about to detain the wrong man," he said. The taller cop frowned. "And you are?" The man didn't answer right away. He reached into his blazer, pulled out a slim black leather folder, and handed over a document. The officer looked it over. His eyebrows rose. His posture shifted. He looked at Jaylen, then back at the folder. Then the man said it, clear, calm, and final. "This man, Mr. Jaylen Barnes, is the majority shareholder of this entire dealership group, and today he's here to observe, not shop." You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Chadwick laughed nervously. "Wait, what?" Derek dropped the pen in his hand. Mr. Rourke's face turned red, eyes darting everywhere. Jaylen didn't say a word. He just looked at Chadwick for a long, still moment. "You came at me loud, threw out lies, called the cops on me, all because I looked at a car you didn't think I should look at." Chadwick stumbled. "I didn't know." Jaylen cut in. "You didn't know, but you acted like you did." The officer who had almost cuffed him lowered his head slightly. The man with the clipboard turned to Mr. Rourke. "You and I will talk later, in private." Then he turned back to Jaylen. "Sir, you want us to have this man escorted out?" Jaylen looked Chadwick up and down. "No need," he said. "He just escorted himself out. Have you ever watched someone throw power around only to find out they picked the wrong target? What would you have done if you were Jaylen?" Chadwick stood there, red-faced, sweating under all that designer confidence. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet that makes every breath feel heavier. He looked at Jaylen, then at the doors, then finally down at the floor because the moment had hit him. He didn't just lose control of the room. He never had it. Jaylen didn't move, didn't gloat, but he made eye contact with the man who moments ago tried to have him thrown out. You wanted me to feel small, to second-guess myself, to shrink when you raised your voice. But see, I've been shrinking for people like you my whole life. Not anymore. Chadwick opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, but nothing came out. Just then, the executive stepped forward and nodded to security. Escort him out, he said flatly. Flag his ID. He's permanently banned from every Sterling Auto House location nationwide. The entire room watched as Chadwick was walked out, past the same velvet ropes he once stood beside like a gatekeeper. Now they were a reminder of the world he thought he owned, until it turned its back on him. Someone in the corner whispered, "That's what privilege looks like when it breaks." Have you ever seen someone trip over their own ego and fall face first into the truth? Jaylen didn't say another word to Chadwick. There was nothing left to say. But then his gaze turned toward Mr. Rourke, the manager. The man had gone pale. His eyes darted. He looked like someone begging to disappear into the tiles beneath his feet. You know what makes you worse than him? Jaylen asked. Mr. Rourke flinched. He lied to feel powerful. But you knew it was wrong and you went along with it anyway. The room stayed quiet. All you had to do was ask a question. You didn't. All you had to do was stand up. You didn't. Mr. Rourke swallowed hard. The executive spoke from behind Jaylen, voice cool. Your suspension is effective immediately. We'll review termination paperwork within 24 hours. Leave your badge at the desk. Mr. Rourke didn't fight it. I know, he said softly. He just slowly took the pin from his shirt, set it down, and walked away. No eye contact, no words, just silence and regret. Jaylen turned back toward Derek, who looked like he hadn't breathed in minutes. You tried, Jaylen said. That matters. Derek blinked. I didn't do enough. Jaylen nodded. Next time, do more, not just for someone like me. For anyone who's alone in the room, Derek nodded hard. The executive stepped beside Jaylen again. If you're ready, sir, we can walk you through the final documentation upstairs. Jaylen didn't answer right away. He turned, looked over the cars, the showroom, the people who watched it all unfold. Then he said it. I came here to buy a car. But I left with the truth. This place didn't need a new fleet. It needed a reckoning. The next morning, the headline didn't mention a sale. It mentioned a shift. Black investor profiled at dealership reveals he secretly owns the brand. The clip went viral, but it wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was quiet. Just a man falsely accused, calmly saying, "You think I don't belong here? I own the floor you're standing on." And just like that, the world flipped. In a world where appearances often speak louder than truth, Jaylen didn't shout. He didn't fight. He let the truth speak for itself, and it echoed through every corner of that showroom. If you've ever been underestimated or judged before someone even knew your name, this story is for you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to Stories Abode, where real stories remind us what really matters.